Ezra Furman, All of Us Flames album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from Ezra Furman. She is a Chicago-based singer, songwriter. She's been at it for quite some time, and while this is the first time I'm talking about Ezra's music on this channel, I've enjoyed a lot of her work over the years. In her early days, I was very casually into albums like The Year of No Returning and Day of the Dog. These were albums that sort of dabbled in everything from garage rock, art pop, to some good old-fashioned rock and roll as well. And she did have a great bass sound, but my only issue with these albums was I kind of wanted her to do a little bit more with it. I would have loved to have seen something a little bit more visual, something more narrative driven. I felt like it was, buried deep within those albums, just not out yet. And I did kind of fall off with her around the time of Perpetual Motion People. This just was a little bit unfocused. I thought she needed a little bit of a revamp. But I finally did get exactly what I want with Transangelus Exodus. This album had the energy of her early work as well as the genre shifting, but it also had a far out and really fun narrative. And while maybe not as narrative driven as I would have liked, I thought the energy and the songwriting and just the personality on her 12 Nudes album was really fun as well. Now, it's been a few years since we've heard from Ezra. She's grown a lot since then, and from the sound of these new singles that she's been dropping, she has grown quite a bit as an artist as well. I've been super pumped to chat about this. Let's do it. This album starts off with Train Comes Through, and I love this as a single. I've loved it since it dropped, and I think it really does a great job of ushering in the sounds of this album. It starts quiet, but it's very glitzy. It's very glammy. It is a slow burner. This is far from the sort of garage rock and roll that she was putting out in her early days. But it's really good. I do love hearing Ezra just in this mode of thinking about the big, the big album picture, and that's what this is. And her performance is just really cool. I love how shaky and bluesy it gets at times. It's very cool. Throne, on the other hand, has some serious drama to it, even some tension, but it's also very glamorous, very glitzy, and it's really good, even if it's a little bit more on the rails than I usually like hearing from Ezra. It's a bluesy, broken down tune with a ton of personality. I also really love Dressed in Black. I mean, the pageantry of this album is a huge selling point. Very regal, it's very glamorous, and like we see here, we also get tons of nods to girl groups of the 50s and 60s. It's done really tastefully too. While this is very far from where Ezra started years ago, this just sounds right now. And I think Forever in a Sunset is the best track here. Once again, it's a slow burner. It just starts off very quiet, but all of a sudden we're getting these huge vocals from Ezra and these pounding drums. It almost reminds me in a way of like what Orville Peck was doing on his last album, but it keeps growing. It just gets more intense with every passing moment, and I love how visual this album is. I mean, if you love a good, strong album narrative, give this a shot, and by the time this chorus rolls around, it's pulling from Americana, glam rock, arena rock, and more. I just sort of wish that Ezra stuck the landing a little bit more. I've never been that high on Book of Names. As a single, I did think it was one of the less interesting tracks that was put out. I mean, like I said a few times so far in this review, there's a lot of slow burners on this album. There's a lot of tracks that, take their time getting going, but outside of like a little kick snare drum every once in a while, there's not a lot going on this track. And yes, it's heartfelt, but it just doesn't really progress that much. It's just not my cup of tea. Point Me Towards the Real isn't that much better. I mean, hearing the warm tropical rhythms of this track, I thought it was going to be really good. But once again, it doesn't really progress that much. And Ezra is certainly, capable of putting together an emotional, very, larger-than-life performance without that, but this track just doesn't progress. And it does have some cool elements. The woodwinds are nice. I love the synths that are haunting this track, but overall, it's very average. And I still think Ali Sheedy in The Breakfast Club is my least favorite track here. I mean, this has been a very streamlined release with Ezra very casually coming out of her shell and really sounding great doing it, but this is just too much of a leap towards the weird. It's too much. The lo-fi production and Ezra's very hushed performance on this track, it just takes me out of the groove. Outside of that though, this is still my favorite thing that Ezra has done in quite some time. For the more low-key side of this album, I think Lilac and Black is awesome. It's the drama, it's the intense visual lyrics on this track that really, grab my heart and don't let it go. And when the hazy, almost psychedelic rock or psychedelic soul instrumental pops in, things just get to mouth-watering. Ezra's very frantic performance is very captivating, and lyrically it's once again stunning. The pacing is really great as well. This is such a simple formula, but Ezra really knocks it out of the park. Poor Girl, A Long Way from Heaven's really great too. This track has a seriously glitzy groove to it I just can't say no to. I mean, seriously, the groove here is wildly good. It's got a certain amount of sleaze to it as well. It's really captivating though. I love the haunting chorus, and the backing vocals are really great too. It's just the right amount of weird and wonky. Temple of Broken Dreams I love as well. As a matter of fact, from a songwriting stance, I think it's my favorite track here. Ezra's vocal performance too is wowing. It's such a bluesy, tragic tune. I love that so much. I'm not as crazy about I Saw the Truth undressing though. This is kind of a low point for me late in the album. I mean, the synths are cool, the atmosphere is actually pretty great overall, but this performance from Ezra is just not where I like hearing her, and the sluggish pace of this entire track is just not enough to keep me excited. I don't know, I just expect a little bit more. But I do really love Come Close as a finale. I mean, it is on the lighter side, but Ezra's performance is absolutely chilling, and lyrically, this is just another really intensely wrote visual track. It's actually rather beautiful, and does a great job of just, tying up all the ideas from this album in a nice little bow, and just really, just ending this album where it should be. This album's pretty good. I mean, it's not Ezra's best, it's not incredible, but I think it's the best thing that she's done since Transcendelic Exodus.